Welcome to Noble, a network of owners, business leaders, and entrepreneurs. Here, we focus on the 5 stages of business: launching an idea, establishing a business, hiring employees, creating leaders, and then expanding your impact. We hope you enjoy today's session.
So I had the privilege of having my own, I'll say radio show, but it was in a radio station podcast weekly. I got to interview some incredible guests, 30 minutes. I was in a radio station, so I had an engineer on the other side of the glass, and just one conversation after another. Well, one of those, and I knew her before she was a guest on the Heroic Experience, the show I had, Sheri Nash. And when Chaz said, we're looking for conversations with people who are entrepreneurial business owners, people that have kind of this path, this journey that of faith, of family, of business, and kind of how that all weaves together. And I thought, oh, Sheri'd be a great guest. So glad she was able to join us. So I'm looking forward to this conversation. And one thing that I always enjoy about the interviews is there are things that I never knew about people's lives until I sit down and start asking questions. I learned so much, and I know you all will too. So please welcome Sheri Nash, and we'll start our. So at first I was going to do, I didn't know if I should do like Oprah, like tape a Matchbox car to the bottom of everybody's chair, like you get a car, you get a car. That's a little too much hype. And then I was going to send Sheri, I was going to send her a list of questions that were like gotcha questions and kind of twist it and get them. And I thought, no, then she'd be a little bit too stressed. So then I sent her the ones I was actually going to ask. So good friend of mine. But before we get to, I want to go back to, I'm not going to dig into, but before I get back to childhood, which is fascinating because I know some of it, there's some exciting news that you have in connection to your, well, what was your former business. So cool. Tell us about the exciting news that you have, that transition, I'll say.
Yeah, super big news. My first business, Temperature Pro Columbus, I started that a little bit more than 7 years ago, and made some life thoughts, changes, decided I had to do some different things, and had the opportunity to sell it to 3 amazing gentlemen who I very much like and appreciate. I think they're intelligent, and I was willing to sell the business to them because I am very confident that they will, triple down on what I was able to do. And one of the things I had said to these gentlemen was, my goal for you guys is to please make the business 2-3 times bigger than I could, so that my kids and my family can see the truck someday and be like, we started that. That was ours. And, I just actually met with them last night, and they're like, yeah, we're doing it. We're working on it. And so it's super fun. And I still get to have a hand in the business. So it's the best of both worlds.
Well, that's good. Congratulations, by the way, because we'll get to some of those questions a little bit later. This was such an interesting journey. It's so rare, especially in that space, in that industry.
Yeah.
I know we'll get to that in a minute, but I didn't want to point out, and I'm so happy for you for that. So let's go back. And what I'm going to do is when we go through these segments, I'll say segments professionally in your life and in your career, we'll pause rather than say questions to the very end. If there's something that really jumps off the page at you and you're like, well, I want to ask about that, because some of you, I'm guessing, are entrepreneurs with children, entrepreneurs with family, entrepreneurs with responsibilities outside of what you do. So, and as we work through this, I'll give time for you to ask a question that might have come up in a part of our conversation, so that's not like saved to the very end. So I'll make sure we have time for that. So you, growing up, you had 2, not just 1, but 2 entrepreneurial-minded parents.
Very much so.
So tell us a little bit about what that experience was like. Like, what did they do, and how did they get into that, and how that impacted you as a child?
It's so ridiculous. It's hard for me to talk about my parents because I loved them so much. They're in heaven now, but my both of them were entrepreneurs. My father started his own MAI shop, so he was a real estate appraiser, and especially back then, an MAI was like a PhD in real estate. It's member of Appraisal Institute.
Got it.
So it's a big designation. You have to work really hard to do that. And he started his shop and brought in a partner and built it to something really impressive. He ended up having a national reputation, and I think he made it his hobby. You know, he loved it. He did it. He became a teacher and a professor in it. So he made his life into everything about being an entrepreneur. It was amazing, and it was amazing to grow up watching, seeing, and I would feel like living and breathing it.
Now, what about your mom? What did she do?
My mom was we like to say, a big old fashionista. She was beautiful and, you know, worried about how she had the look down, you know what I mean? It was the era of stiletto heels and hats, do you know what I mean? So thank God it's not now. But, so she had her own career going in the fashion world, and then stepped out of her career, became a stay-at-home mom. And when we became a certain age, she went and became a paralegal, got some accounting degrees, and ultimately joined my father's business. Her background and her family had a lot of real estate investing. So I almost said dabbled, but that's insulting to her. She was involved in that also. So the match was dad's real estate appraiser, my mom had a background, and they were both go-getters.
Got it. So your father did real estate investment, but it was your mom that had the history of doing it.
She was
More
the one
than-
with, her family, her father, it's kind of ironic, her father was my grandpa was a big real estate investor. Really did some impressive things as a kid that never got past 8th grade. So he did some really impressive things. So he taught mom, and then my father, God love him, you know, was just an Iowa farm boy. First one to go to college in his family, and really, he made it big in my eyes.
Mm.
And a lot of people's too. It's very cool. People still, I ran into someone recently and they randomly asked, you know, hey, I knew a Nash a long time ago, blah, blah, blah. And they said, you probably don't know him. He was a real estate appraiser. You know, and I was like, I might. There's a chance. So it was very cool because the gentleman was like, what? Your father was a teacher of mine. He was a mentor, and what a cool connection.
Wow.
Yeah, and now I work with that gentleman in a different pathway.
See, the world gets smaller.
Doesn't it?
As you get older, I guess, but it's amazing, those interconnections. So you've got a multi-generational entrepreneurial heritage in your family.
I think so.
So what were the challenges of being in a household? Because so you shared some of those stories with me. What were the challenges of being a child of someone that kind of worked their way there? It wasn't given to them. Like they worked
Yeah,
their
not
way
at all.
there.
You know, challenges, I'm not sure, but it was ingrained in every part of my childhood.
So it was what you knew.
It's what I knew. You know, I have, from the age of 6 or 7 years old, I have memories of going and walking through framed houses with my father. We'd drive all around Ohio and we'd look at land, and he'd say, isn't this amazing? And I'd be like, no, this is not something I'm enjoying, Dad. You know, I want to be playing kickball. But everything he did somehow was what's going to get us ahead. But what I learned is that all of those trips with him and all of those opportunities, it's ingrained in me now. It's shocking, the stuff that I know, or else you're like, oh God, that fell out of my mouth. That was my father. Because my whole childhood was go look at land, let's go look at properties. In high school, I had to go take pictures for him or one of his business associates because they didn't have time. Our dinner table was talking about business and how to do financials and what's going to be smarter. So, you know, they were inadvertently grooming us all. I have 2 sisters. One is actually right there.
Front row.
Yeah. But they were grooming us, but never did they say,
Right.
this is what you're gonna
You
do.
have to. They
Yep,
didn't
never
force
once.
you into that.
Nope.
Interesting. So of the things that you were, I'd say life skills that you were being taught, that was being modeled for you, what were some of the ones just as you reflect back now that you're grateful for that were just so helpful as you started and grew a business?
Without a doubt, he was a family first man, and so is my mother, without a doubt. They never once missed any activity from any one of us, even though I look back now and I think, man, he was probably incredibly overwhelmed at times. So it was family first, children first, without a doubt. Also, what I learned and watched from my dad is learn how to do it. Be as good as you are at what you want to learn, and then hire or outsource it so someone else can do it. And he would expand or move into some other area, but he was always training the next person to be him, if you will.
Well, that's so brilliant. The reason I say that is because so many business owners, I know I'm talking to the room here, so many business owners have a hard time letting go of the vine. They grow something to a point and then it just stops. You see all kinds of potential, but it's not because the idea is bad, not because the business is bad, but because they can't let go of the vine. Either they're afraid of what's next if they don't have that purpose, that thing that fills a lot of their life, or they haven't built it well enough where they can delegate it on. So they try, and it ends up giving them a dumpster fire, like, well, I'll never do that again. Well, it's because you hadn't prepared it for handing off to someone else. So if you've got a great idea already, I would encourage people, like, who is the next person I need to add, and then prepare for handing that off to the next person. You should already be automatically, if you know you've got a good idea, and that's the great thing about Noble, is they will help you kind of best practices, what not to do in your business idea. So as it starts to take off, you should already be thinking about who's the next person I need to add so that I continue to grow this thing and focus on what I do best, which isn't the day-to-day,
Right.
the admin, the things. What were some things that you identified you're going to delegate off as soon as you get to a point in your business? What were some of those things you delegated?
Well, personally for me, I'm a very big thinker. I think big. I love to come up with ideas and, ooh, this is the next idea and this is what I'm gonna do next, which is beautiful, except someone has to do the stuff to make your big things happen. And that was a struggle for me, for sure, when I started Temperature Pro. Because I'd be like, look, this is what we're gonna do. I can't wait. I've got this great idea. And I'd go tell my 2 employees and they'd just look at me and I'd be like, right? And they were not as excited as I was about any of my great ideas. And so I learned that I had to build the foundation and I had to lay the groundwork and bring them in, make them interested and inspired sounds cheesy, but I'm gonna stick with it. Inspired enough to wanna pursue my next idea. And because I'm a little bit of a bonehead sometimes, I would like say, listen, if you really want to do this and you take it over, you won't have to hear me talk about it all the time. And I'll leave you alone for a little while. And they'd be like, do you know what I mean? Maybe. So I learned that I had to know who I was and what was best about me. So I am terrible at what I call back end things. You know, inputting data, making sure billing goes out, making sure I've done something to ensure cash flow is working. That, to me, in my heart, I'm like, yeah, that's all gonna be fine. But that's a terrible plan. So it's horrible. So I had to really work to force myself to focus on the things that are not good for me, or, you know, and that was hard because I held on to it, like you said, a little too long. And what should take me 25 minutes truly would take me an hour and 45 minutes because I'd go make a phone call or I'd decide to, you know, see if someone needed my help and I'd go interrupt others. And so I had to learn quickly who I was, what my assets were, and share the other tasks that weren't mine. I actually ended up making lists of things I should never touch.
Here's some good advice. Yeah, the good advice of
Uh-huh.
things you shouldn't touch. Absolutely. And I remember you sharing with me in one of our conversations that having an ops manager was just such a wonderful move for you and for them
Yeah.
to add that piece to your business because, well, this room is, we've got quite a few visionaries in the room. And I know in the Noble community, there's quite a few visionaries where the big ideas are so exciting, but the back end things of who's going to get the work done. One of the reasons why Noble continues to do as well as it has is because they've intentionally added those people that get the work done. Otherwise, the idea just, it's a great idea, but it doesn't have the legs. And so that I can totally understand the idea of the power of, if you especially are an ideas person, and a lot of entrepreneurs are, thinking about your next ad should be someone that really loves to do the back end. That's another, the working genius that we've had an opportunity to do a workshop here of identifying what people's strengths are. You want to have those people that are tenacious, that love to see a task through to its end. Ideas, that's not their concern. It's the implementation of like, you want me to do this, I'm going to get it done for you. That makes their day. Where you, on the other hand, it's like, I don't want to do that. I want to grow the business. I want to talk to people about my business. That's the perfect person to have as the one leading it. You really need those people. And knowing who you are, that's an interesting one. I'm going to come back to that. So when did you identify, because entrepreneurial is a big buzz. According to latest studies, this generation of the millennials and Gen Z are the strongest, most concentrated entrepreneurial people as far as a generation goes that we know of in history. So entrepreneur can be a very big buzzword of like, hey, I got an idea, now I'm an entrepreneur. But going back to your time, when did you realize that you had these entrepreneurial business owner ideas? That was kind of who you were. When did you first realize that?
You've asked me this before, and I've had to think about it a little bit. So I actually asked my husband for help with this question, and he came up with something, and then I came up with, I was like, ooh, and here's a story from childhood and then young adult. It was the era where, it was just do what you've been asked and don't ask when I was a kid, just do it.
Yep.
And I used to have to mow multiple lawns. Lawns at our rental properties, our lawn, my grandmother's lawn, and little known fact, or it didn't matter back in the 70s and 80s, that I'm terribly allergic to grass. And so, I'd be out there mowing the lawns and it was horrible. And I'd have to stop to blow my nose and cough and it was just a different world. You know what I mean? People are like, it's almost over, go finish it. So I decided to hire one of my friends to mow the lawns for me. And
You had subcontracted.
I subcontracted I was probably 12 or 14 years old. And I thought that was brilliant. So if I was getting paid $10, I paid them $7.
There you go. You got a margin.
It was amazing. Until my father found out. And first he was offended. Why I told you to do that. And then you could see him go, this is okay, keep going. So I fixed my own, drama. But also, I ended up having, during college, between my junior and senior year, and then even after college, I worked for Mount Carmel in their accounting and finance division. And, you heard me say you have to know who you are. Somehow I thought it would be great to put me in the accounting department. And, and I have a finance degree, so to me, I was like, that makes total sense. But for me to sit in a cubicle and do 8 to 9 hours of pro forma and balance statements was horrifying, but I didn't realize it then. So and I was completing my work, but probably 7 months into my co-op, the VP came and said to me, a great person, influenced my life for sure. And he said, Sheri, we really appreciate everything you do. I was like, well, thank you. And he goes, and you definitely understand the process and what you're supposed to do. And I said, yes. And in my ridiculous head, I thought, I'm going to get a raise. You know what I mean? I was like, I am going to win. And he ended up saying, okay. And I could see, he was like, she's not getting it. And he said, unfortunately, you're not the right fit for this aspect of what we're doing. And you know how like still you're not quite there? You know what I mean?
Catch up to what he
Yeah.
just said, yeah.
And he ended up, lovingly and kindly saying, what we've noticed is that you always are up from your cubicle, you finish your work, and then you go and discuss things with people, and you interrupt their work. And I said, I know. And have you noticed we have a lunch bunch and everything? And he was like, yes. Yes, I've noticed that. And so he said, I've been thinking and I have some ideas for you. This is not for you. But he hooked me up with 3 entrepreneurs and said, meet Sheri Nash. She needs your help. She's wonderful. And that led me to my very first career of being a nursing home administrator. Those entrepreneurs took me under their wing and said, we're going to teach you how to do something where you can be the big picture girl and you don't have to do the accounting, which clearly was not for me. And that like started me on the path. I ended up running retirement communities briefly, but that I was running a retirement community where my boss was 8-9 states away, and it was sort of in its own way running your own business.
Right.
It taught me so much.
Interesting. Now, there's a gem in what she just shared, which is just because you're skilled at something doesn't mean that you should be doing that. I have an accounting degree, but a few months in, I realized I hate accounting. Like I might be good at numbers, but making things balance, if you're off by pennies, you have to balance it, right? I'm like, this is way too tedious. Like John, I was told, John, you're good with numbers. I'm like, okay, I'm good with numbers. I like to calculate money, so I'm going to be an accountant. I am so glad I'm not an accountant today, because that would have been horrible for me. So just because you're in something, and for people that are kind of in that startup phase where a lot of people within Noble are, the thing that you don't like to do, that you know is a necessary part of your business, that's what you should be figuring out how to delegate first. Outsourcing, you can testify to this. The people in the room can testify to this. Outsourcing is getting more and more common and more affordable. So identify in your life what you do not like that is a necessary part of your business, and figure out how you can either swap with somebody or outsource it. It sounds so expensive, but it's not. And it's really important because the effect that you've had, imagine if you had stayed at Mount Carmel, right?
Oh, I would be a different human, I think.
Different person, right?
Yeah,
Your life
100%.
journey would be entirely different. Yeah, I'm going to go back to that because that sets the ball on the tee for a little bit further down. So your first success then, it sounds like, as an entrepreneur was like 12, 14 years old. Like you had profit margin built into somebody else, and you weren't dealing with allergies.
I wasn't sneezing anymore.
That's like entrepreneurialism 101. Like you see a need and it affected you directly, and then you find a way to fill it, and somebody else to fill it, even better. Oh, that's great. So I'm going to transition now. Any questions that anybody has in the room that you'd like to ask about childhood, things that maybe some best practices as you have either family members now who are young and you're the entrepreneur? Any questions you've got for Sheri that she might be able to answer for you?
Since your father was an entrepreneur, was he distant a lot as a childhood? Because I have a young son, so I find myself working late nights, but trying to figure out that family life, work-life balance. So how was that growing up?
That's an awesome question. And I can tell you, both of my parents just so engaged. My dad traveled often, but he would make a point, for instance, of traveling home for an event of his kids. In my entire childhood, he missed one basketball game and spent an hour discussing with me on the phone, which back then was not cheap, right? Every ridiculous play. Do you know what I mean? So he wasn't distant. And both my parents made a very significant choice in that. Now I am struggling with that. 2 of my children are sitting here, and I recently noticed, because I love what I do, I recently noticed, oh man, I'm missing the mark here right now. on where some of my dedication should be. And just because I'm being filled up, or just because I feel great about doing something, that's not all life is. And so that was a big reason I sold one of my businesses, because I had dug in too hard. I mean, getting joy and some stress. But when my youngest said to me recently, I said, "Gosh, buddy, I'm so sorry I got home much later than I intended. I really apologize." And he said, "It's not your fault, Mom. It's what you do. You have to do that." And you know what I mean? I was like, oh, and I was like, "No, buddy, what I do is you're my first priority." And we hugged and loved and all of that, but it was a moment for me. And that's when I was like, I need to make some shifts. I need to outsource more. I need to create better balance. And by the grace of God, I met some gentlemen that would purchase my business to give me some time back. But it was a very big learning lesson for me that probably you, like me, I could work until 9 o'clock a lot. And I'm just in my groove. And I made a decision consciously that with or without two businesses, I won't do that again. And so I actually have on my calendar, close the computer. It's actually on my calendar. So does that help at all?
No, it does. It does.
Good.
Yeah. Thank you for asking the question too, because I know there's people that are going to be seeing this later. They're going to be thinking the same thing. That question is for us who care about our businesses and about our family. We'll get to that. How do you manage? And I won't say juggle. And there isn't a balance. There's no such thing as work-life balance. You can't equally have, because, well, one person I heard called it work-life flow. Sometimes your family's going to need more, and then another, sometimes your business is going to need more, and both the family and the business understand that if there's a healthy relationship there. So let's dive into this is fascinating to me. Let's dive into the Temperature Pro era of your life, I'll call it. You were one of the few or the only sole female franchisee in that entire Temperature Pro world. Is that correct?
Yep.
The only.
The only.
Now there were, as I learned from you, there were co-owners, husband and wife, that would own one. We'll get to that, but that you were the only one in that world. So blue collar space, it's not uncommon for that to be true. What was the biggest challenge you faced being that, we'll say gender, in a role that's typically not that, in that space of HVAC?
Oh gosh. This is true. Like this story, this quick little quip I'm going to share with you is so true. I was 2 weeks into having opened Temperature Pro Columbus, which is a heating and cooling company. And, supply houses are coming and they all want to get my business. That's their goal, of course, as it should be. And I had this, what we would call sort of a member of the old boys network enter, you've got the picture, right? Yes. He entered the space and I happened to be standing in the entranceway. And he said, "Hello, nice to meet you. I'm here for the owner." And I said, "Hello, I'm Sheri." And he said, "Nice to meet you. I'm looking for the owner." And, and I felt a moment, but then I thought, oh, this will be fun. And so I said, "Oh, the owner." And he said, "Yes, I need the owner." And I said, "That's interesting. Hello, I'm Sheri." Yeah. And he really took him a little bit.
He was catching up too in his brain.
Yeah.
He wasn't all there yet.
I've been there on the catching up. And he ended up, God loved this gentleman, who, by the way, ended up to be a nice partner. But he ended up spending the next 30 to 40 minutes explaining to me that this business is hard. You're going to have to work a lot. Do you understand what you've done? And I don't know if you're getting a sense of me. My answer was, what? This is going to be difficult? And
He probably thought you were serious.
He like tripled down on, that this was going to be hard. And, it was just, I ran into that a lot. It probably took 3 years before And I had developed a bit of a reputation in the industry, hopefully mostly good, hopefully, that people were like, oh yeah, Sheri. But there was a lot, even with the technicians who are mainly men, that they also struggled with, well, how are you gonna know you're not gonna know what I'm doing. And so we kind of coined a term, tech speak, or tech explain. The techs used to try and, overtalk me, if you will, like she's not gonna understand what I'm telling her. So they would, I'd say, no, that's not the way we're gonna do it. We're gonna do this. And they, try and use, technical terms. And, they did that because they felt I wasn't educated about their industry or what I didn't do. And, they learned, and I also found some awesome technicians, that I could call or text them at any time quietly. I'd be like, what does this mean exactly? Do you know what I mean? Or how long is it gonna take to do this? I'm a little confused. And they've been amazing. And actually, two of those people have been on our team. They're the longest employees. But and I'll still, even as a matter of fact, last week I texted them a question that I should know, but I started to feel insecure because another tech thought he could educate me, if you will, and the answer I got back from the technician was, this answer, I'm not helping. Do you know what I mean? And I sent him laughing emojis, and I was like, that's true, I do. Do you know?
Yes, you shared a story with me, which was so powerful. You said you went to the national conference one time and you kept hearing these owners that boasting about how big their company was and how much revenue they made. And then you asked them, so what do you make? What do you and your wife make? And this was the most surprising, shocking, it probably shouldn't be, but it was for me. What shocked you with the answer they gave?
Oh, yeah, I forgot I told you that. Yeah, I'm at this huge place where, everyone, people were standing up in some of these breakout rooms and announcing, my top level was 3.8 last year. I made 4 million last year. And my company is not or was not that large. And so there was moments of, but I decided, well, here's my chance. So I did ask, what are you making? What do you bring home? And almost every single one of them made or earned less than I did. So what I learned there is the top level, your top revenue line as a business owner is not the thing that matters the most.
No.
At all. It appears to be a great, I'm gonna say, it felt like they were bragging, and it did make me feel a little less than briefly, but
then once you saw the numbers.
yeah, once we were out at baseball games and at the, cocktail hour, and I got down to the nitty gritty, that's when God bless them, they were making half and less than half of what I was sometimes.
And they were splitting it between the two of them.
Exactly.
Husband and wife, meaning both were working more than full-time hours, and they were making half as much as you by yourself were making in profit.
Yes.
Yeah. So there's that big lesson that I recall, and I've got to ask this question, is judge the success of your business on your profitability, not your revenue. Revenue is a bragging point. It's to get investors, but profitability is where it matters to you as an entrepreneur or a business owner. So an excellent measure of success. If you were going to start an HVAC company today.
Susie has a question.
Oh, Susie has a question. Yes.
Yeah, it's okay. It actually comes from one of our online viewers.
Oh, wonderful.
And who has some question, and this one seemed relevant. This is from Grant, who you know, and it's timely right now. So you went into the HVAC business and left your mark in the field that wasn't necessarily your background. So here's the question: can you explain how you decided to go down that path and describe the challenge coming into a new field that wasn't necessarily your education experience?
Right.
Wow.
Why HVAC, right?
I guess people are listening. What the heck? Yes, it was not. As I shared, I had a finance degree and worked in retirement communities. So very strange switch. So I came from a family that, as I've touched upon, real estate investors and appraisers. And my father had all of us start early. I should say my father and mother, but he was the driver on investing in real estate. I purchased my first house at 20 and just continued to keep going. And at some point, I had a whole bunch of kids. And my husband had taken over a fair amount of the managing of those properties. And I was all of a sudden relegated to being the wife and the mom instead of the investor and the, you know, the knower of things, I guess I'm gonna say, because I became a stay-at-home mom. And this happened a number of times, but there was a moment in time where my husband said a plumber is going to come over and talk to you about what's happening at one of the properties. And I was like, okay, that's great, let's go for it. And the plumber came over and was not interested in me at all. He kept saying, you know, we probably should talk to your husband. I probably need to, I've really had this impact me, haven't I? But we need to, I can explain a little bit, but where's your husband? What he didn't know is that I knew how to fix what we were paying him to fix. I just didn't, at that point I had 4 kids and I was like, this is ridiculous. I can't do this. And then he really uppriced me. And, but he didn't want to talk to me. He wanted to talk to Jeff, my husband. While we were like dickering back and forth, my husband drove up, came home, we were outside. And this sweet, not thinking well plumber turned and started talking to Jeff directly. And Jeff said, true story, oh, it's not me that you should be speaking to. It's her property. You need to talk to her. And 3 different times the plumber ignored me and went back to my husband, who literally was walking inside like, you're talking to the wrong person. Like, kind of like, hello, I'm trying to help you. We did not hire that plumber.
Thank goodness.
And I was complaining to my husband later. And so my husband was the one who said to me, why don't you do something about it? Like, you complain about this a lot. Like, you're frustrated. Why don't you go do something about it? So that started a path and a journey. I was going to make a difference.
Yeah, that's another thing that I love about entrepreneurialism is that the people who are, I'll say, savvy in this space, whether you support entrepreneurs or are, you never judge a book by its cover. I've heard so many stories from people who are professional salespeople who talk to the person. They ask the questions of the person that's sitting in front of them. And then I've also heard the horror stories of a friend of mine who's not even entrepreneurial, but she's a highly successful businesswoman, went in to buy a car, she and her husband, right? And the guy, the sales guy, and I was like, I know it was male, sales guy kept talking to the husband. He kept saying, she's buying the car. He wanted to leave. And she was like, no, I like the car. It's worth it to me. But 3 times in the conversation, her husband had to point back to, she's the one buying the car with her money. You need to talk to her. So my point is this, never judge a book by its cover. Always ask questions of the person sitting in front of you, because you never know who that person, and I've also heard from professional salespeople that the ones that didn't look like they were uber successful and super wealthy often were, and had cash literally in bags to buy that vehicle. And they were just looking for the salesperson that would talk to them, not to their money. So thank you for sharing that. Great question online, Grant. And online, if you've got questions, keep firing. We'll make sure we have time to ask those. What advice do you have to an entrepreneur just starting out? What are some best practices of what to do and what not to do?
This is interesting. Over the last few weeks, I've had the opportunity to speak to new business owners, new people that are thinking about things just by the weird who I'm running into. And one of the things that my husband and I struggled with Temperature Pro, and I'm seeing a trend, if people choose to become an entrepreneur after they've been in the corporate world or been in the business world, it appears to be a hard transition sometimes to go from the corporate world to you're a sole business owner, or you're a business owner with potentially one employer or 2.5, whatever it might be. Because a lot of the questions I receive are, well, who's gonna do that? And I'm like,
Well,
fascinatingly, you are, and there's a lot of questions of, well, my team member doesn't show up as, they weren't as timely as I wanted, or they didn't get their job done. I think I'm gonna let them go immediately, or I'm gonna write them up. And, this was a struggle, especially between my husband and I, because he does very well corporately. And, he'd be like, well, that's not acceptable. And I'd say, oh, I agree 100%. But I can't let at that point, one technician go, because then guess what? I don't have a business. And he learned that very quickly. It's a growing pains, right? But those are the kind of questions I receive often, about, well, who's gonna do that, or well, how do you get that done? And I think as a new business owner, a lot of it is you're getting it done. And you're squeezing it in whenever you can. And I can't tell you how many I got made fun of a lot, because I would send, I can't tell you how many 2 a.m. emails. I'm a female business owner of a certain age. I don't sleep so well as a lot of us. So, I'm like, all right, I guess I'm gonna knock those 4 things out. And my team would be like, when do you sleep? But you get stuff done when you can. So that's a big issue, understanding the transition. And another thing that is cash flow. People think that is not as important as it is, oh, I'll just get the work done. But you can't count on, if you don't have the cash to manage the business, it doesn't matter what might be in your bucket soon. And that's where a lot of business owners have struggled, or the people I had a close network with within the HVAC field, that was a big issue for them. But this is how much I'm making, or, but this is what I sold it for. But they were forgetting, like you mentioned, the profitability, or did you build the pricing right? Or do you have the money to invest before you take on that new client? And, I struggled with that too. I certainly, one of my best and worst experiences as a new business owner were cash flow related. But those are big. We can talk about KPIs all day long, and we can measure all sorts of, special indicators. I found it really didn't matter if I didn't have the cash to back up my plans and what I was trying to build.
well said. What would you say for someone who's established, like their business is 3 to 5 years? You have a question? Yes, Carrie, go ahead.
Why HVAC rather than another trade? What was the strategy there?
Interesting. I guess a lot of trades would fall into this, to be truthful. But for me, I decided that everybody in this day and age thinks that air conditioning is a must. And it's no longer, I guess I could have it. And obviously in Ohio, heat is a must. And so I felt it was going to be very recession proof. And so that made sense to me. Also, plumbers, God bless the plumber I spoke about earlier, but plumbers are even harder to locate at this point in time because it's such an aging profession. And so technicians for HVAC, still a problem, but the 2 indicators I looked at was what was going to be recession proof in the home services industry, and how hard will it be for me to find people to either train and grow my own or locate.
Great.
Great question.
Good question.
This is another question that comes from online from Grant, and it's like in this time. So for the young people that are working their 9 to 5, how would you recommend, or what advice would you have for those looking to make their way into entrepreneurship? Would you say to always continue work your 9 to 5, or would you say you need to commit yourself completely to leave that?
Oof.
How did you do it? How did you make that switch?
Okay, so I transitioned from being a stay-at-home mom. So I had my career, became a stay-at-home mom. We had 6 kids and I wanted to be with them. Became a stay-at-home mom and then jumped to entrepreneurialism. So I, thank goodness and so grateful, had the support of my husband to ensure if I fell flat on my face, you know, we weren't gonna lose any more than we were able to lose, if that makes sense. But I can relate Grant's question to when I was, you know, in the professional world, working for a large healthcare company, which I did for 15 years, I don't know, I really need to figure out how long I did that, 15 or 20 years. I was trying to grow my real estate at that point in time. And so I was grinding hard. I actually was a professional and picked up an outside job as a bartender and server so that I could have enough money to make my down payments and afford all those things. So for me, my experience was work as hard as you can, save as much as you can, and be very careful that you don't make the switch until you have enough cash that you're sure you can cover your expenses. And sometimes though, I bet John has some thoughts on this too, but sometimes you just have to make the choice because some entrepreneurs aren't working hard enough at their side gig because they're too busy at the other stuff too. It's a difficult thing, but for me, it was about, do I have enough cash to make the next move?
Yeah. Yeah. So I would say this, it depends on what you're transitioning to. So the role you were going to, the business you were opening has overhead built into it. Cash is absolutely important to that. If you're looking at something that's more in a gig factor type role where it's just your overhead, you know how lean you can start with that. And then depending on what your life responsibilities are, you know how much time you can put in should you go to something full. But I still think you want to, I think the savings part is you can keep your expenses lean, but save enough that goes twice as long as you think it'll take. And then that gives you enough runway, twice as long as you think it'll take. And if you're like, yeah, I don't know if I can get there, but it seems like the opportunity's right, then I would talk to other entrepreneurs saying, I've got this idea, I've got this built, I've got a business plan, create a business plan. If you don't have a business plan, it's not official. Create that business plan and then say, I know I can do this, but I don't have enough runway. That'll communicate 2 things. Number 1, communicate you have a plan, you know what it is, it's concrete and specific. Number 2 is that you're thinking ahead, knowing that I know it's going to take longer than I think. That shows wisdom. So many entrepreneurs, they like jump in and the swimming pool isn't even filled yet. You're a little bit ahead of your game there. But if you've got the swimming pool full, you've got a business plan, you know how long it's going to take, you say, I figure I need at least another cushion. See that there are people out there that would love to support aspiring entrepreneurs, especially if you check certain boxes. Say you're a veteran, female, minority. There's so many boxes you can check of people looking to. Angel investors are everywhere, and they're looking to invest into people that know what they want to do. Those 2 things communicate that to you. But I saw another hand, Steve. Yes.
So you kind of touched on it in a couple different segments. You were talking about you're having one employee, not wanting to lose him, and then you're saying that you're already in the field where it's hard to get those specialized employees. So thus, since we're in service fields, how do you keep an employee with a specialized background from leaving and starting their own company or just going to a competitor? Because what happens, you said if you lose that one employee, then you have to have somebody go out and do the services if you cannot.
Right. And I cannot repair a furnace, so.
I cannot as well.
Right, exactly. So I can talk the talk, but you don't want to put a tool in my hand. So, you know, for me, and this falls so into my wheelhouse, I treat my employees or anyone that's ever been on my team as though they're gold. And I'm very much a people person, but I took the time to get to know who are you, what makes you tick, what's going to be super important to you. I made sure that I touched base with them on the regular and not just about, did you get that done? You know, I did what I could to make their needs be met. And I'm a big believer that it's not always about the money, but you have to be smart about making sure they get their money. So I built a team and I found ways to make my technicians, how are they gonna shine? You know, I have one tech that loves to train new people. Send him, I could send him, my 16-year-old went and started learning how to put water heaters in. And this tech was like, yeah, bring him, I've got it, I'll teach him. But he doesn't want, for instance, this technician that I really adore, doesn't ever want to have to go into 10 houses a day because they're repairing things. So guess what I did? I kept him in his lane. I made sure he felt heard. And, you know, I managed who people are to make them succeed. And, you know, when we did the transition from me being the official owner of Temperature Pro to the new owners, we had a team meeting. And the new owners asked the techs, tell me, why here? Why are you not, you know, leaving? Rumor has it you could, you know, technicians leave for an hour, for $1 an hour. You know, that's an easy leave, which is unfortunate. And it's so ridiculous. It made me so happy. They were very clear that, well, we're here because of how Sheri treats us. We're here because of Sheri. She makes sure we're taken care of, and therefore we do everything we can for her. And so just through listening, trying to meet their needs, it's sometimes just joking. I took them out to lunch every month. Everyone I took out to lunch once a month on their own, and then we did team meetings. And it was just lunch, let's just talk. And but they were very clear. They stayed because of how I treated them.
Yeah, and I want to undergird this point really specifically. That I've had conversation with you, so I know how you take care of your people. Career Builder had a study that showed the top 3 reasons why people stay or why they leave. An opportunity, number 1 was because number 3, I'll start with number 3, was compensation. And that makes sense, rising costs, right? Of course, people's costs are going up. So one thing that I know you would have this kind of openness with your people is like, if somebody has another offer for you, let me know. We'll see if we can match it at the very least. But I think that conversation rarely came up with your people who were bought in because they loved working with you. They do love working with you. Number 2 was work-life balance. We all know that people have very busy lives going on outside the walls. And the advantage of you not just being a business owner, but being a wife and a mother and having all that background, knowing how many balls you're juggling in the air at the same time, you can appreciate that someone else's life is busy. That work-life balance is important, but number 1 reason was recognition or the lack of it. And you do an excellent job of recognizing your people. We have wanted that since we were babies, the recognition of the people we work with. That means the world to people, that they know their value, that they know we make a difference. Why would they go anywhere else? Yes, Rob.
Yeah, so I got a question. I think it's in the same swim lane as where we're at right now, and maybe even a little bit before. So I'm intrigued with, so in the HVAC industry, I have a brother-in-law who was in that industry and then he had an illness and had to stop it. It was like, he was like an artist.
Yeah.
I mean, I watched him. I actually went out a few times. Well, I'm like, I can't do this. I mean, you know, they do a couple of measurements and they're cutting and it's real, I'm telling you, it's like artwork. I mean, it was, when they got done, it was like, I can't believe you actually cut that metal to make it look like that. So I have a high respect for because it's not just something you grab on. I think they're transferable skills, but it's not easily transferable. You know, you have to really be taught and mentored, I think, in that.
Agreed.
So you made a mention earlier about the business itself with Temperature Pro. I like that it's got Columbus in there. I'm just learning about the company as you're talking. I've never actually heard of it before. How's that? I've heard of other ones because they're advertised more or whatever, you know, just the name recognition or whatever. But I know what you do, and I know there are some technicians that just they work for themselves. It's just Bob's heating and cooling, and Bob's okay with just doing whatever Bob gets done, you know,
Yeah.
but it kind of word of mouth is, you know, Bob's pretty good at it, and you get Bob's number and you just call Bob, right? And I think that happens in that industry too.
Yes.
What were some of your strategies? Because obviously you got it to a certain point of profitability and revenue, and then and even you talk about these others that had a lot more or whatever, but you got to a point where you were satisfied with where it was at, as I guess I would think. And was there, because and I can tell the entrepreneur that you are, you know, it could have been one of those where you go, I'm just going to grow this thing and be gigantic, and I'm going to be in 5 states, and it's going to be this. I'm going to have trucks all over the place, their name on it or whatever. And which would have been one strategy, but it seems to be like you had a strategy of health and growth, right? And talk about that a little bit, just some of the decisions you made to keep it, because it sounds like you wanted to keep it very healthy, revenue wise, and not overgrow it,
Yeah.
and not undergrow it either.
So, very astute, and I did, I never wanted to be actually, my husband and I talked about this a lot. I never wanted to be over 1.8 million. That was just our goal. Like, I'm not going past that, because it seemed from everyone I'd spoken to and what I'd learned, that was a whole new thing. Now, I say that if they were running as efficiently as I was.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's the big caveat. You know, I guess I should say I didn't want that much more profitability than I had. Because I ran a very efficient business. I managed expenses like you wouldn't believe. I managed time, I managed parts, I was constantly negotiating all sorts of things, which is how I was more profitable, I believe, than so many others. But it was a decision for us so that I could maintain. I mean, I'm a mom, I'm a wife, I homeschool our kids. So, you know, there is a point where I'm like, I can only do so much before we start to flounder.
Yeah.
We did get to a place where I had 12 technicians, and that was too much for me, for the team that I had built. And what I found is that I wasn't that much more profitable, because what was happening was I was spending more time chasing problems. And, but if I went back to my 6-ish techs, I knew them, I could count on them, I knew exactly what they were gonna do. We had built loyalty. They knew what I was gonna do. They knew I would always have their back. And so we purposely sussed it down. As people left, I didn't replace. And I just constantly asked the team, you know, how are we? What do you think? Because we're about to hit the summer season, and, you know, we're gonna be insane. Are you guys with me? And I asked, are you with me? Or should I go more? And what we'd also learned from a culture perspective is that we had a very good culture with our 8 to 9-ish employees in total. Once we had more, things changed. And so that's where we made the decision, we don't want to get any bigger than this. And I couldn't manage that much more. And, you know, we liked it. We liked the culture. I think that's probably a big piece of the answer. And I agree, I really could have, and if my life was in a different era, I think both my husband and I think probably if we were in a different stage of life, Jeff would have eventually quit his job, and together we would have tripled, quadrupled down and done exactly what you said. But, you know, we still have kids that need us, and it was a decision we feel great about.
Yeah,
That's great.
yeah, great question, Robin. That's a thing that, especially when you're starting off, the idea of growth is exciting. Like, of course you'd want to grow it as big as possible. Not necessarily. There should be joy in your work. While things got injected into the world, that wasn't how it was first intended. work was supposed to be a joy. Work was supposed to be something. And for those of us with faith background, I'll get to that shortly. We want our work to glorify the one who made us. And if you don't like your job and you're the owner of that job, that is not going to be a good representation on who made you and who you do it for. So keeping that in mind, I think being honest to yourself, if growth for the sake of growth, getting bigger just for the sake of getting bigger. Well, you saw firsthand, I'm betting there were people of faith at that national conference that were just worn out.
Yeah.
And weren't succeeding. They weren't thriving personally or professionally. So that's a cautionary tale there of, wow, we're always seeking to grow and to do more. Absolutely. Growth is also an aspect of our Creator. It shouldn't be at the expense of the joy that comes with it. So my question to you would be, how has your faith, you said a comment to me that really resonated there, but how has that been a part of your life from start to where it is now, but especially in those times where, well, things aren't going as smoothly as you'd like or as they had before, in those valleys, I'll call them. How has your faith been a piece of that? I know it's a tough question.
Wow. Well, faith, I truly base so much of myself on my belief and trust in God. There's just no doubt. I find myself talking to God so much. I think probably every thought in my head is, oh, thank you for this. Oh, thank you for that not happening, or everything along those lines. I am based, I believe, in gratitude. It's just sort of that's where I function from. You know, we were raised in the church. We did the CCD and the Catholic schools and all of that good stuff. But even when it became my decision to continue on to choose church or believe, however you practice, I did a couple of segues away from the actual practice, but I never actually left my strong belief and my trust. And I think that's probably a big thing. You know, everyone has terrible valleys and so valleys, right? But when I thought that I was going to fail on a few different things, or when I thought something, oh, this is it, here we're on our way down, here we go. And there's been a couple of them. I just really trusted that what was supposed to be was going to be. And how it was supposed to work out is how it would work out. And I just believed it's going to be okay. He has my back.
Well, I think there's proof of that. You shared just earlier in our conversation, right? Where you said, you know, we need to make this move. You committed to the next step. Suddenly, 3 people who are an excellent fit for what you're looking for. There's no coincidences in life. We know this. And when you have this underpinning of faith, you know there's a larger hand at work orchestrating things you couldn't possibly make happen if you tried. And I think that's got to be really affirming and encouraging, because the time when we need trust the most is not when things are going well, not when they're going smoothly. You don't need to trust then. Everything's working out great. It's when things aren't going according to plan, when there's a lot of risk, there's other people's lives and well-being at stake. That's when having that underpinning of faith, of trusting that things are going to work out for your good and for others' good. I think that only strengthens your faith.
Well, you know, the economy has been rough, and you know, I'm more than willing to share that at Temperature Pro, my last year and a half was not the shining star I wanted it to be. Incredibly stressful, and I was incredibly worried, much more for my team than myself, and that's the absolute truth. I was so worried about, are they going to be okay? If I can't get their hours, if I don't get the business built back up to where I want, it was stressful for me, and there's pride involved, of course. But my biggest issue was, I mean, these people have counted on me for, you know, some of them 6 years. How dare I let this fall, if you will? And I did talk to you about this, and I in my heart, I was ready to triple down. My husband was right next to me. My sister jumped in and helped. we were gonna rebuild back to where we were. It's okay. My team's like, we're with you, Sheri. Don't you worry. We are here. Which shocked me. But I knew that there was gonna be a better path. And I deeply believe, that these three gentlemen popped out of the woodwork. You know what I'm saying? That's just, I do believe that's heaven sent.
It was a provision.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep, and they've said, from their own standpoint, they're like, we don't know how you were one person, one of you built this, and they're like, there's three of us, and they're learning, but they're overwhelmed, and of course they should be, they're brand new. But that made me feel better in the sense that there's gonna be three people to build what successfully and continue on, and they're all in, and I truly believe that that was a gift from God.
Which leads me to the great segue, by the way, to what's the exciting thing that's going on right now? Because you as a serial entrepreneur now, you started when you were 12 years old, for crying out loud. So you are already serial when you open the second one, but serial entrepreneur where transition from one, you're still actively involved and supporting. It's not like sold it, see you later. You're working with those three in a transition plan. But what's the exciting thing you've got going on right now that people might not know yet?
Very excited.
Yeah.
A year ago, I opened another business, and it is my passion, and it's bringing me nothing but joy. It's called Forever Weight Loss, and it is a medical weight loss company. And I was inspired to open that business and about a year and a half ago, because I've struggled with my weight much. It's a blessing. Every time you see me, you're going to get to see a whole new Sheri. It depends on where I'm going to be at. I like to think of it as a gift, but it's been an issue for me as an adult. And so for me, being able to open something that truly speaks to others has been a tremendous, this is a gift for me, because all this new business is doing is filling my bucket on the regular. So, I now have the privilege of being a part of someone's journey that is down on themselves or feels like they're a failure or, has tried everything and nothing works. And I have the privilege of understanding them, meeting them where they're at, continuing to be an entrepreneur because it's a business, make no mistake. And it just brings me joy, and it's been open a little bit more than a year, and it's been a fun ride so far.
That's another thing too. They call it different things, but if you can find it, Chaz was a wonderful thing with this ideation, where we're at the conceptual idea of a business, right? If you can identify what you're skilled at, what the market needs, and what brings in revenue, but the fourth aspect is really important: what you're passionate about or what you enjoy. And that's what I hear you sharing with it. If there's that fourth element, because you could be really skilled at it, accounting, we were talking about earlier, right? You can be really skilled at it. The market needs it. It'll pay you money. But if you're not passionate about it and you don't love it or enjoy it, it's literally going to suck the soul out of you. So that ideation that Noble has in the Noble Academy of asking those four questions: what are you skilled at? What does the market need? What brings in revenue? And what are you passionate about? Because that in the values you talked about, right? Although it's so cool we're in the positive, so I want to go back to that. But in the values in particular, when you're owning a business or you are the business and things aren't going according to plan, you have to be drawing on something, not just your faith as well. That's a huge aspect. You've also got to be pulling on I believe in this. I know it can work. You've got to be passionate about it. Passion isn't found or gained when things are going smoothly. Passion is uncovered when things aren't going according to plan, and then you find a way because you're passionate about it. Now, I like the fact that you're talking about that there's joy being poured into you because of your work. I think that's like a bonus on top of. Why do you think that is? Why do you think you get that from this one thing that you didn't get from Temperature Pro? You probably had glimpses of it.
I had glimpses at Temperature Pro,
Yeah.
and I don't think I recognized how much I was missing something at Temperature Pro. Because as Temperature Pro grew, I became a little more absentee. I became much more, here's Sheri, and other people were doing other things. And what I know about me is that I fill up on connecting with people, enjoying people, making a difference for them. That's just a base piece of who I am. And as I grew Temperature Pro, all of a sudden I'm not answering phones anymore. All of a sudden I've got incredibly stable accounts, and they didn't need me coming to visit with them on the regular, which, you know, I was supposed to be sales and all of that, but really it was filling my soul with connection. And so eventually at Temperature Pro, it was running effectively, and I had removed myself from the things that gave me energy, which was people and connection and all of that. So this business, as it stands now, and I intend to grow it very effectively, I hope, fingers crossed, but I'm currently the sole employee. I had employees previously, but they filtered away, and I chose to just stick with myself. And so every piece of what I do is me connecting with someone, me implementing the next move. And, you know, my family would be like, how was work? Well, you know, what happened at the clinic today? And, you know, I'm like, I got to talk to 6 people about ways to feel better, or 4 people came in and were excited that they'd lost 8 pounds this month. And that's exciting, and that makes me feel good. So, you know, and I have much more control of my calendar at this business. It's appointment only, and you know, if Eli or Grace or someone has an event, guess what I do? I block that calendar out, and we're not available, and that's been a big change.
Yeah, so you're talking about for yourself.
Yeah.
Work-life balance, that improved dramatically for you.
Very much.
More importantly, you're putting energy into the bucket, where if the current thing you do, whether it's 9 to 5 or your endeavor, the entrepreneurial endeavor you do, if that itself is not putting energy back into your bucket, you have got to make sure that that's happening. I think this is a bonus that it's happening in what you do. But for most of us, and perhaps in our careers while we're getting our side hustle going, our 9 to 5 is not doing that. You've got to be finding something that is putting energy back into your bucket, because you need it for your loved ones, you need it for yourself, you need it for your 9 to 5, you need it for your side hustle. You've got to be intentionally into self-care. How cool that your new opportunity, and we're going to ask more about that, your new opportunity does put it back into your bucket. I think that's fantastic. Susie, yes.
Grant has another question online that pertains to this. As someone that has just recently sold one of their businesses, what fears or doubts did you experience? And what other options did you consider before pulling the trigger on the sale? So it's taking a little step back.
Okay, so fears, what if the new owners don't treat my team the same way I do?
Right.
And they're very different humans than me, you know? So I feel very protective of my team. What if it goes sideways? What if, you know, this big dream that our family and I poured into, what if they don't manage it? Like that upsets me right now, just thinking about that. So, you know, that was very scary. Before we thought about selling, and, you know, selling had been in the back of our mind for quite a while, on and off. But we thought about, should Jeff join the business, because I didn't have enough stamina to get it exactly where I wanted it to go because of other demands. I'd started another business when things were flying high. So do we have Jeff join and let him pick up the analytical, detailed things, and that allows me just to be Sheri and go fly at the things I'm good at? We consider that strongly. We considered just ride it out, you know, just ride this flow out, rebuild, take your time, take some pressure off. And, you know, some things happened within our life, within the business that felt for me as though they were a moment in time. This is a moment in time. And I got sort of a wake up call as to you only have so much time in life, and your kids are only young for so long. And, you know, I decided that the wake up calls that were being gifted to me, if you will, it was time to listen to them. And so I would not have just sold to anybody. And I would not have we were not in a position of have to. We were in a position of, wow, this is a nice opportunity. And so it really felt good though when we signed those papers and went out and had our celebratory drink and got to make some phone calls. So I know it was the right choice. I do worry and pray that it will grow bigger as my hope is.
Yeah, and there's a really a gem of wisdom built into that piece of feedback in why you give yourself runway, because if you get to the point in the growth phase in particular where desperation sets in, you'll make decisions based on potential, not on what's the wisest move. And I know that you can talk about this. If you asked any of the established business owners or entrepreneurs in the room, serial entrepreneurs, desperation is not where you want to make a decision. Either business going well and it's to the point where we don't have too many other choices, or when you're on the growth side, just starting out, people can feel, they can sense if you're comfortable in figuring out best fit, or whether you have to have this and you'll do whatever it takes to make this work. That's not the best position to be in. But if you're like, we're a good fit for each other, then what comes along with that is just a better opportunity. It's win-win in that sense. Yes, Rob.
Yeah, so you're on the sell topic a little bit, and it's really good, I think, for the audience to understand what that feels like, right?
Yeah.
And so, in a couple cases, in one case, you could say, well, I have a business, I'm gonna sell it, and it's gone. And in fact, I got this plaque on the last company, and I thought these little plaques were really cool that they did when they helped the company get sold. You know, they had hundreds of these things. And the guy goes, "Did you get your grave marker? You know, your gravestone?" Because the company that I owned died at that point. I mean, it did. I mean, the name changed everything, so it's still going, right? But that's what they call it in their world. So talking through that just a little bit. So you sell this company. And there are multiple ways to do that, right? You could sell it and still be part of it. You could sell it and still be an employee. You could sell it and not be an employee at all. You could sell it and have an earnout where you're committed financially for the health of it for a while and you get paid back. But, and you don't have to go into all that detail or whatever, but it sounds like you're very much concerned about how it would grow, even when you're not being there. So that tells me you're still linked into it emotionally, if nothing else, right?
Yep.
And maybe just talk about that a little bit, because it's hard to let go.
Very.
Right? Yeah.
Very. One of the key things with the new owners when we met for months, it felt like, one of the key things, their concern, and then I promise I'll get back to you, but it ties in, their concern was, this business is very much built on Sheri. People know Sheri. They don't necessarily know, you brought it up, they don't know Temperature Pro Columbus. Trust me, people do, but you know. But no, if you would watch Facebook, people would say, you know, oh, my HVAC went out, what do I do? They didn't say Temperature Pro Columbus, they said call Sheri Nash.
Yeah.
And it's still happening, and I'll still help and answer, right? But it became Sheri. And which was purposeful, and it was a decision as to how to do that. But their big concern was, what happens without Sheri? You know, your team has told us it's all about Sheri. You know, you've built these huge contracts and these relationships. What's next? And it was interesting. The more they asked those questions, the more I thought to myself, do I want to do this? You know what I mean? Because of the emotions. And when they were pointing it out to me, I thought, what? It is about Sheri. What am I doing? But that's why they decided, I'm a bonehead, I know. But that's why they decided, their ask was, we need you, we know we need you. We know that we don't have what you have, from a personal perspective. So, you know, we kind of made a unusual contract, if you will, where, you know, I'm still around to help manage the big contacts I have and the big contracts. And, you know, they want me to be able to jump in on things that become flawed, or, you know, it needs a little bit of a different kind of touch. They're very clear that they're great humans. I really like them, but they're just different than me. And so that was their big ask for me. And you know, it's only been a month, maybe 6 weeks, but they've already reached out and said, you know, hey, I think I need you to reach out to this employee. This person's struggling, you know, get some insight and help us learn what we should be doing. And our hope is that that I can make a difference and help things keep sailing properly. My hope is, as that's happening, I can figure out how to let go and understand that, you know, it is changing. And one of the employees said that recently. They're like, it's not the same. It's not the same at all. It's a different business. It's still the same name, and they still call me because I still know the tech stuff that the new owners don't yet. But it is a different business already. And so I'm spending time on my own letting go. Like, I know things are happening. I'm seeing things happening in the business that in my heart, I think, oh, that's, I walked that path, and this is not the business you want right now. But new entrepreneurs, I think, in my opinion, they come in and they're gonna throw everything at the wall and hope that every business is theirs. They want every single piece of everything they can get, and that's their stage right now. Whereas I have already done that and learned, oh, no, you pick and choose, and not every customer is yours, and not every agreement is a great agreement. So I'm having to learn to watch that and, you know, share my piece, and then allow them to tell me how I'm incorrect, and they're going for it. And I appreciate that, but that's a really hard. Does that make sense to anyone, or?
It's like a parenting role, you know?
Yeah.
It sounds like the parent, like, hey, I'm gonna give you my 2 cents worth. You're an adult now, so you can do what you like, but here's what I've experienced. But you can't, you know, you can't make them, or you really haven't let them fly
Right,
and
it's-
figure it out on their own. But you can kind of see where this is going, and maybe maybe that won't happen, but the odds are, you know, as parents, we have that feeling. Yes, Susie?
This is another question from Grant online, and you may be answering it right now, but this just puts a different perspective on it. What has been one thing as a business owner that you have found you can control very easily, and one thing you lost control of almost instantly?
Since I've sold?
It doesn't say, so it could come from
Okay.
either business, but it sounded like you were already kind of talking about those
Yeah.
things.
One, I'll do it my best. One of the things that has been hard, as a sold business, it's been hard to watch. And it's been so short, you know, but I met with the gentleman last night, and you know, their words to me were, we still need you. We realize we still need you. And they said, we think you're being too polite. You're trying to stay out of our business, and we need you to get, actually the quote was, I need you to get real nosy. And, you know, so I think maybe the one thing happened recently that I had to watch. And I think that's where they're like, you know, we need you, and you're being very polite. So it's very strange. We're walking a very weird line right now. It feels weird to me, maybe not to them, but it's not my business now. So I have to let them do their thing. Maybe it's gonna be a fail, maybe it's gonna be a win, but yet, they're saying they need me, but they're not always listening. But yet I'm having to accept, so I do a lot of going home and saying to my husband or the kids or whomever, I just had to let it be today. I just let it be. I didn't even look at Temperature Pro's calendar today. You know, which seems silly, but that's a big move
Yep.
because I have spent 7 years looking to make sure a tech finished something, or are they home yet, or any of that stuff. And that's a strange feeling. And the new owners haven't figured out that part of their role is to see if the techs are home yet and make sure that the jobs are ready for tomorrow yet. And that's no insult at all, none at all. But because I didn't know that in the beginning either, you know, so I'm trying hard not to meddle or still act like it's my job to find out why someone is at home at 8:30 at night.
Yeah.
I'm still actually making the call though at 8:30 and saying, how can I help?
You mentioned earlier, you mentioned a few times throughout this conversation, people that have had a significant impact. One was the VP at that with the healthcare that kind of planted a seed, whether you connected the dots at that point or not. It did, the dots connected later for sure about what you're really well suited for and what you're not well suited for. Who are some other people outside of your parents too? You've spoken really glowingly of them, of those fundamental foundational things that they contributed to your life. Who are some other people that had significant impact in your life and why?
I have one person, anyone that has spent more than a few years with me knows the name. A gentleman named Rich Fradiani. He was actually the person that Dave from Mount Carmel kicked me over to be truthful. Rich was at that point the VP of Bethesda Hospital, and you know, I was still in healthcare business at that point, and Rich essentially he hired me to be a trainee, but also I chased him like crazy, by the way, because he was like, I don't have time for you. I'll visit with you, and I'll you know, my friend wants me to talk to you, but I don't have a lot of time for you. You know, that kind of a thing. So I ended up sending him letters and calling him every other day, absolutely the truth, for 6 months. And 6 months, because something told me this guy was gonna make a difference in my world. And so finally he was in Cincinnati, and finally, you know, I got a very rude message on my voicemail from him that said, what the heck are you doing? I am so sick of your letters, and my secretary feels sorry for you now. I'll see you tomorrow at 2. Do you know what I mean? And I, silly, had the nerve to call back and be like, I'm sorry, I'm not available at 2. You, right? And you look back and you're like, you're an idiot. But and he was just an older Italian man, and he was like, I don't give a crap if you're available at 2. I'll see you at 2. And you know, and I was like, oh, of course you will. Do you know what I mean? Like, oh, I'm sorry, I'm in another state, but I will be there tomorrow at 2. And somehow, well, he said, this is our first official meeting. You know, I'm chatting, and clearly I was oblivious about how confident I should have been. And in the middle of our conversation, me telling him about my life goals, he goes, what is it that you really want? He said, it sounds like you just want to run everything. It just sounds like you think you should be the boss of everything, and you just want to do it. And I was like, well, yeah, that's actually correct. You know, nice. And he actually truly got up out of his like big executive chair and said, well, you go sit in my chair and you do it if you think you're so smart. And I really didn't know what I was supposed to do. And I don't know if you guys would take the chair or not, but this bonehead went and sat in his chair. And the darn phone rang, and he goes, well, there you go. And, you know, and he was really being incredibly gruff, but I just was like, well, I'm here, you know, I finally made it. And I answered his phone, and in the middle of it, he was like, literally, what the heck are you doing? Give me that phone. You know, and that started an amazing relationship. I worked with him for a little more than a year and a half, and he mentored me until he passed away. And he spoke to me like that for our entire relationship. I'd call him up and I'd ask him a question. He'd be like, "What is wrong with you? Who trained you?" You know, I'd be like, "Well, kind of you. Do you know what I mean?" And he was like, "Well, I was the worst trainer. You should know this stuff." And but he was amazing for 15 years. He protected my career. He protected my growth. He and within our network, if someone didn't say something appropriate, he addressed about me, or they didn't like something I'd done, he addressed it with me. But he protected me within that crew too, if you know what I mean, and addressed it with whomever. I would say he had a very fatherly role in my life. And and when I would mess up or make a mistake, this is how familial we had become. He'd call my dad up in my dad's office and he'd be like, "Do you know what your daughter did now? I don't know what you were thinking with her." And my dad would be like, I know, she's a bullhead. Do you know what I mean? And so he deserves so much credit. He was an amazing, he took care of me. He took care of my career and helped. He told me, "You're not going to work for people." And his quote to me, it felt amazing. He was like, "You're a terrible employee." And I was like, "I don't think that's true." "Well, you don't know. You're not working for you. You're a terrible employee." And he told me, "You got to get out you can't be an employee. Get out." And so I'm not an employee. I think he's right.
Yeah.
I want to lead and grow.
Buried into that is another gem that you really need to listen to, especially in today's social media, fast-paced world. You said 6 months, right? If you total the math, which in my head is fuzzy, but that's hundreds of contact points to someone that you felt you knew inside was worth it. It's 8 to 13 touches now on average, that where if you reach out to someone, they'll sometimes respond, let alone it'll turn into anything. But you knew that Rich was worth that. If you know that there's a prospect, a client, a partner, whoever it is, that's worth that, keep in touch with that relationship. I know that I've had opportunities that, like the opportunity I had down in Florida, that was in the works for over a year. That didn't happen just out of the blue. That happened over the course of a year, if not a year and a half. That was something that was just nurturing in the background. So if an opportunity is worth it, stay with it. Stay with it. Just stay top of mind. Just touch. You don't have to be as perhaps bullheaded as Sheri. Like, "Give me the phone. I'm going to sit in your chair." But it's got to be a fit for what your personality is. But don't give up too soon. If you believe the opportunity is worth it and you see really strong alignment and a great fit, stay after it. Stay after it politely, perhaps, but stay in touch with those people because you never know what that opportunity is going to turn into down the road. Got just a couple more minutes left. So I want to open it up if you've got any questions overall about our conversation online that are watching or here in the room. I want to make sure I get time to answer those. Sheri can answer those before we wrap up. So I'll ask a question then. What would you say overall, is looking at the whole thing, what is the thing that you're most grateful for in your start to where it is now? Journey, not just as an entrepreneur, but as a person. What's the one thing you'd say kind of overarching, "I'm grateful for this"?
Oh,
Tough question, I know.
John.
I know. What gets you just right off the top of your mind, from your heart, like what really resonates most strongly with you?
Oh, my family. Oh, yeah, my family.
Isn't that a difference maker?
Yeah.
Yeah. Who you're married to, that's a game changer. If you're married to someone who believes in you, that you literally trust your life to, you trust your money to, you trust your future to, you trust your hopes and dreams to, you are blessed beyond comparison. I can say that because I have that. But I know so many people in this world where their potential is blunted because of who they're married to. If you're married to someone like that, that is an absolute game changer, isn't it? Isn't it?
Yep. Yeah. I mean, my husband thinks I can do anything. It blows my mind. And I often tell him, I said, like when things were going sideways,
Yeah.
I'd be like, you're not smart. Why would you have let me do these things? You let me start a business. And like, I'd be like lovingly yelling at him, what is wrong with you? You're not thinking clearly. And he would just be like, you're good. You've got it. We're good. And, you know, he's very calm compared to me. But, no, I mean, he trusted me and gave me everything I wanted to go. And not just for business. I've had some other family crazy ideas, you know, of how I want to do things. And from the beginning, he was like, I'm open to that. I like that idea. So
Yeah.
I'm very lucky.
Yeah. Blessed for sure. And there's an element to that. There's no coincidences in life. Go ahead, Steve.
I just want to say this has been a very good interview and very good topic, and I think the chapter in your life of selling the business and going through it has been very enlightening to everybody in the crowd, because you could just be here talking about how your business is growing, but you're actually in a transition that I think we all might think of one day or trying to figure out. I just want to say thank you, and
Thank
I
you.
think it's a good time in chapter of your life.
That's kind. Thank you so much.
Chaz, anything you've got before we turn it back over to you? Any questions?
No additional questions from me, but I would certainly like to thank Sheri so much for sharing her wisdom.
Yeah.